Hi, I am Adi Ignatius, editor-in-chief of Harvard Business Review, and this is HBR's The New World of Work. Each week on the show, we talk to a top-tier CEO or business leader about how we can work together more effectively. When do we come back to the office? What kind of technology should we use? What's the point of an office anyway? So we have a great guest today. Before I introduce him, though, I want to put in a quick word for our friends at Unisys. Unisys is an IT company that builds critical solutions trusted by demanding businesses and governments around the world. They partner with clients to enable cloud transformation, protect critical operations, and empower the modern workforce. Visit unisys.com to learn more. So our guest today is Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta Airlines. Ed has been at Delta in a number of roles for more than 20 years, and he served as CEO since 2016. Earning the airline widespread praise, particularly in its handling of the complexities resulting from the COVID pandemic. He also, by the way, has a podcast called Gaining Altitude, in which he interviews CEOs and other prominent figures. So welcome to the show, Ed.
Adi, good to be with you.
So now I have to say, it's not enough to run an airline. You have to come onto my turf and do a podcast too, right?
Well, it's interesting. We got a lot of people very curious about what's going on in our space, and it gives us a chance to bring others into our universe as well as going into yours.
So, we sort of build this show as Ed Bastian. This episode is, imagine somebody, who could be more on the front lines of the challenges that we all face to maybe lesser degrees that this pandemic has brought to keep an airline going. That's really what I want to start. I mean, you've got teams, we talk on the show about white collar workers. Do you come back to the office? Do you work remotely? You've got people who have to be there physically, who have to deliver physically. What has it been like to try to guide a business through all this?
Well, it's been an interesting 2 years, that's for sure. In the last 6 months, things have certainly settled. They don't feel settling, but they are settling down. And we look forward to getting through this latest variant, Omicron, here very, very soon, according to the doctors, and getting an opportunity to return as close to normal as possible. But you're right, Adi, throughout the entire pandemic, our people have not had the option to work from home. Very few have. And as a statement of unity, we all came back to the office starting last June. Requirement to be back into the office to ensure that we're all together, we're all navigating this challenging environment. And there's been such a great spirit about it. People are excited, and we're excited when we all came back last June to be together, and we see real strength in that collaboration.
So there's so many things I want to follow up on, but let's start with, when you came back to the office together. Again, this is before Omicron kind of maybe upset those plans. But I remember you were relatively early and relatively forceful, saying, I want people to be sort of back in their seats in the office, that there is a value to that. A lot of companies aren't there. They're somewhere else entirely. So talk about, you must have a workforce that has differing views on it. How do you make the office, how do you make this make sense that we really need to be together? How do you make that case, and what have you seen?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, headquarters is not in charge of anything. We use the term headquarters. I think we need to start looking at our lexicon, and it really needs to be a support center to the people out in the business that are making it happen out in the field. And well over 80% of our employees did not have an option, including in the most difficult and darkest days of the pandemic. They needed to show up and perform their responsibilities, taking care of our customers and taking care of our airplanes and making certain that the world keeps moving. And if you're going to be a true servant leader, you come back and you serve, and which is what I asked our people to do. Was everybody thrilled? I think a lot of people were happy. Was there some that couldn't come back? Yes, we were sensitive to that if people had some unique situations. But I wasn't going to leave it to our people to decide how they best fulfill their service obligation. We wanted to serve together, and the majority of our people were very happy to be back.
All right, so now let's talk about this moment where Omicron is not as serious, apparently not as fatal as previous variants. but obviously incredibly contagious. I mean, I've read that, I think the figure was that 8,000 Delta employees have contracted COVID within the last 4 or 5 weeks. Lots of flight cancellations, not just for you, but for the industry as well. How do you cope? I mean, how do you cope with a hit like this? There's sort of eye-popping numbers to outsiders, but you guys keep moving. How do you cope with hits like this?
Like I called it the final kick in the teeth from the pandemic, Omicron, because if you recall Thanksgiving, we had a very, very busy Thanksgiving holiday. A lot of people back in the skies for the first time. And we ran basically a perfect, very, very clean operation, staffing all in the right places and got everybody where they needed to be on time. 2 days after Thanksgiving ended, we first heard word of Omicron, and then within just a matter of weeks, it hit us hard in this country. Right at the same time, we were experiencing the busiest travel surge for demand because of the Christmas and New Year's holiday. A lot of people had put off traveling to that point, all hitting at the same time. So the confluence of Omicron, the most infectious variant we've seen, coupled with the highest demand level, and a lot of our people, as a result, coming down with the, even though our people are vaccinated and boosted, still coming down with the disease. One thing that we did, Adi, is that throughout the pandemic, we've encouraged testing. We've vaccinated people. We give them tests, and so we probably had a better pulse on who was really coming down with Omicron than most other companies, certainly most other airlines. And as a result of that, we took a pretty big hit because we saw it happen within our own workforce very, very quickly. However, over the course of the next couple of weeks, certainly by second week in January, things are pretty much back to normal here at Delta. It was a tough 2 weeks on the cancellations front, but for the last 10 days, we haven't had more than just a handful of cancellations a day due to staffing or Omicron out of over 4,000 operations that we fly. So it hit us hard. We worked through it. Fortunately, there's been no severe illnesses caused by it, and people are now back to doing what they do best, which is taking care of travelers and getting them safely to their destinations.
Yeah, it's all quite amazing to monitor from the outside. I know that you are still encouraging or requiring passengers to wear masks, and maybe some of your competitors feel less strongly about that. But I do want to ask, and at least one question has come in. Did you ever consider requiring proof of vaccination the way some restaurants do, or Broadway shows do, or something like that as a condition for flight?
We haven't. We certainly have asked, a lot of people asked about it, and it's been a topic of conversation ongoing. Internationally, it is largely a requirement to get into many countries around the world. You need to be vaccinated, including our country, and testing requirements. And so there's a lot of paperwork. It makes it very, very difficult to travel internationally when you think of all the requirements and the requirements continuing to change and shift, particularly with this latest variant. All the restrictions went back up again. So it's a huge deterrence to travel when you aren't quite sure what exactly you need or what you're going to find when you show up. Domestically, we've been able to keep the airways open throughout the entire pandemic because we're deemed by the government to be an essential service. People need to get to where they need to go for medical reasons, for health reasons, for jobs, et cetera. And so it's not like going to a restaurant or going to a movies where you've got various options. A lot of people don't have options. They need to travel, and they need to get to where they're at. Secondly, we carry at Delta millions of people a week. To be able to check and validate not only vaccination records, but potentially exemption requirements and the like would be just a huge logistical snafu that would cause us to really slow down the operation and put the onus back on our people to try to manage who gets on and gets off planes. So the airplane is the cleanest place you can be. Everyone is on that plane is wearing masks. The air filtration systems are the highest quality. They change out the full air with environment within a plane within every 2 to 3 minutes while we're in flight. People are adhering to the requirements. They're not moving around. They're buckled into their seats. So I don't think there's really a reason why we would need to check vaccinations in order to fly domestically, coupled with the fact that demand, customers tell you they're ready to go. It's not as if it's deterring travel. People are ready to travel.
If you just joined us, I'm here with Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta Airlines. There are a lot of great questions that are coming in, but if you have a question that you'd like me to pose to Ed, put it into the comments and we will get to those in a little bit. This also makes me think of the talent challenge, and you know, I'm interested in how tough it's been to retain talent. I mean, I don't know how widespread it is, but we all see videos of air personnel being abused by patients who aren't happy with mask requirements or whatever. So, you know, to what extent, or what have you learned about what you need to do to retain top talent at this point?
Well, I think everyone is in this environment needs to ensure they're staying very, very close to their people. They're communicating, that there's a level of transparency about what's happening, and never more so than the air travel experience with all the challenges that you highlight. Yeah, there are certainly cases that are well documented of air rage, and all the airlines have had them. Pleased to say at Delta, they're very, very few. It's, you know, we've been relatively, I would say unaffected, but the numbers are really quite low for us. Our people are trained to handle those situations. They do a fabulous job, and candidly, customers police it too. You know, on board the planes. You know, when somebody is not following the instructions of a crew member, it's not just our crew members. You know, the fellow customers step in and ensure that the flight is to go off on time as safely as possible. When you think about the bigger question about retaining and recruiting, we've hired 9,000 people over the course of the last year. We had a very, very large early retirement opportunity for our people. It was voluntary. About 20,000 people took the opportunity to retire in the latter part of 2020. So we needed to supplement our team, and we've been hiring all across the board, from pilots to flight attendants to technologists to aircraft mechanics to reservationists, airport workers, you name it. We've been bringing a whole new generation into the company, and they're doing a fabulous job. Our brand is strong. Our hiring brand is strong. People want to work here. Glassdoor just ranked us yet again in the very top companies to work for, as anonymously by the people themselves that have the best sense for what it's like to work here. It's a difficult time, but it's an exciting industry, and people know we're going to get through it, and they want to be part of the world. And when you join an airline, you're really signing up to be a citizen of the globe and being part of what it takes to keep the world moving together.
So because what you do is so visible, you know, we all fly Delta. We all, you know, feel we know the brand. You know, I think in some ways you're a paragon for what it means to lead a business through a challenging period. So, I mean, your industry has its own specific needs, but you know, I think we all need to get used to the idea we're going to be leading through crisis. It may not be the pandemic, it may be something else, but that sort of feels like the era we're in. So can you maybe offer some general lessons about, you know, how to lead successfully during, you know, a crisis that just requires full attention?
Well, one of the most important things I've already mentioned is about communications, about staying very, very close to your team, to your people, to being authentic, to being transparent. It's easy when times are difficult to want to shy away when you don't have the answers to the questions that you need, whether people legitimately ask for it. It's never more important to be visible and let people know what you know and what you don't know. And we still, to this day, you know, we have a lot of questions that we don't have the answers for, but people respect the fact that we're honest with them. We tell people what we need them to know and do. And when they ask us, we give them our very, very best insight as to how we see the future and what's happening around and why we do make some of the decisions that we've had. We have found our employee engagement, despite as difficult a period that this industry has ever seen in its history over the last 2 years, you would imagine employee engagement to actually take a nosedive. The people would be pretty discouraged or put off or upset, and we have found just the opposite as a result. Our employee engagement scores have stayed just as strong throughout the pandemic as ever, because there's a real pride in what we do. As I tell our people, the pandemic didn't, we didn't have a choice in that. We didn't choose the pandemic chose us, and our company has never needed us more. Our customers, our community have never needed us more than right now. And this is the time to show up and serve and be part of the answer and part of the solution, part of the of bringing the world back together. And it's a noble mission. We fly a noble mission in normal times, but in times of difficulty, it's really important that you fulfill that mission honorably and with passion. And so it gives people a real purpose. And I'd say that's the second thing, is ensure that as you're going through this hard time and you're coming out of this hard time, you reflect on your purpose. You reflect on what you learn. You reflect on what you're going to be doing. But more important than ever, I think it's all given us a chance to sit back and ask ourselves the tough questions as to why do we do what we do? Why is it important? How are we going to get through this? And what it's going to take to ensure that we bring our people with us. And so that's all wrapped into the purpose. And our purpose here at Delta is to ensure that no one better connects the world. And you think about the world needing air travel, it needs it more than ever. We are as isolated and distant from each other than I can ever recall. We just need to get back together, and the airlines are going to be a big part of bringing the world together.
We also talk a lot on this show about the extent to which businesses, CEOs, can be involved or need to be involved in social issues and health issues. You had a very public exchange with the CDC when you were, making the case that, vaccinated people who test positive, maybe should be isolated for a shorter period than what the CDC was advocating. And in fact, the policy evolved. Can you talk a little bit about that as an example of private sector government interaction?
Yeah, well, we need to be very, very active, working together, support with the government support back, and ensuring that we're tackling this huge challenge together with the best minds and the best science guiding the path. And one of the early indicators that we saw in middle of December, as our people started to come down with the Omicron, was we were hearing conflicting messages. We were hearing early on that while it's highly contagious, the impact and the period of contagion seems to be a lot less than the original virus, and the guidance with respect to quarantine and isolation had never changed from the very first onset of COVID almost 2 years ago. And so we asked the question to the CDC, because we were having thousands and thousands of our people that we were having to pull out of the operation in a very disruptive manner and isolate, when the science didn't seem to suggest that was necessary. The science is, and I think the science has continued, we're continuing learning, but with Omicron, there's a pretty concentrated couple days before you're symptomatic and a couple of days after where you're highly contagious. But after that, your period of isolation requirements really drop immensely. And if you can test, and I know there's a lot of controversy around the testing requirement, but if you could test at the end of day 5 that you no longer have the virus present, why are you asking businesses to keep their staff, their critical staff, away from the job for another 5 days? And more importantly, that airlines, hospital workers, firemen, police, people that are providing essential services that we need, particularly during a holiday season, to keep our society moving. It's time, we thought, to update the guidance. And fortunately, the CDC, took our input. We don't have any influence with the CDC, but they took our input. They received the same question from a number of other industries as well, and they updated the guidance. It was really appreciated. And by the way, if you come down with Omicron and you're forced to isolate for 10 days during a holiday period, that almost seemed punitive to people, during that period of time. And the other thing that I was worried about, personally, people wouldn't even test to find out if they had it at that point. If they realize I'm going to miss the holidays, I'm going to miss track. We want to encourage people to find out, to keep getting tested, and to continue to watch the signs to stop the spread. And the policy seemed like it was pushing people in the other direction.
So beyond that, that was an issue of immediate concern, obviously, to you and your employees and your business. Other social issues that seem to cry out for businesses to get involved with if they dare. I mean, how do you choose the social issues, political issues that you will get involved in personally, and how do you kind of manage and protect a brand reputation as you do?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, it's always difficult to decide that. And candidly, my natural inclination is not to get involved in any of them because they're in as the world is divided as we are currently in. All you know is you're gonna upset a lot of people. So you got to be cautious. But at the same time, when you see something happening in your community that runs counter to the values of the company and what you espouse, particularly on behalf of your people, sometimes you feel compelled to voice your view, your concerns, and to engage. And there's endless number of topics that you could pick on a social matter to engage. And I think you have to be very careful and very cautious. As you know, we did engage on voter rights legislation in Georgia. We weren't the only one. A number of companies did as well. Because we saw the effect it was having, and within our team and within our people, and our people were looking up to us, asking us, after all we've been through over this last year, 2 years, and the challenges coming out after the George Floyd situation in the middle part of 2020, and the commitments that we made to continue to push forward and fight to ensure that everyone has equal access, everyone has equal opportunity, and do our very best to promote an equitable and diverse workplace as well as community. How can we sit by and be silent? So that was a tough one, but what you've got to be very, very careful in terms of which issues you choose.
Now, I know you've made it clear that climate change is an issue of importance to you personally. How does an airline, a huge user of fossil fuels, credibly contribute to the sustainability, the climate change issue?
Well, that's a tough one, and because it's a tough one, it makes it a very important one. We're in what's classified as a hard to decarbonize industry because 98% of our emissions, our footprint, is jet fuel, is a fossil fuel. And we do not have a substitute source to propel or use for propulsion for our aircraft as a source of energy. So we need to ensure that we're doing everything we can to seek those new sources of energy, and in the short term, investing and trying to get much greater attention to sustainable aviation fuels. We've made a commitment as a company that by the end of this decade, a full 10% of our flying will be done using sustainable aviation fuels. And while that doesn't sound like a huge commitment, given the fact that sustainable aviation fuels today largely are non-existent, if Delta were to go out and procure all of the SAF that exists within our country, it'd be enough for us to fuel only our planes for one day, and no one else in the industry would have anything else for the entire year. So it's really a very minimal amount. So we need the government to be good partners with us, and we are having those conversations to create commercial opportunities for the energy producers to invest in SAF and the airlines to make sure that we're going to be good partners and purchase and procure those. Because today the cost of buying 1 gallon of a sustainable aviation fuel is upwards of 5 times the cost of 1 gallon of jet fuel. And we just can't, it's not a commercial opportunity at the present stage. The other thing we're doing certainly is looking longer term at hydrogen and electrification and all new technologies, but they're going to take some time. So at Delta, we made a commitment 2 years ago that we were going to, while we couldn't find the answers today with respect to a new alternative source of energy, we could make a difference in terms of offsetting our footprint where we speak. So we invest in certified offsets that eliminate the carbon that we create on a daily basis through investment in reforestation projects, clean water projects, various parts of the world, investing in nature's source of decarbonizing the climate and the world and the planet when we can't find an alternative use to do that ourselves. So there's a full playbook, and it's going to take us, just like the auto industry, it's going to take us several decades before we get there. But we follow what happened in the autos, and they've been on a 20-year journey with electrification and using clean transportation. It's going to probably take us just as long in our industry, but we've got a good path to follow if we stay focused and work closely with our government partners and our customers around the world.
All right, so I want to get to a couple of questions from our viewers. This is from Shripad in Oslo, and the question is, how do you engage with Delta Airlines stakeholders to gather good ideas that can help the company revive the business, specifically coming out of the pandemic?
Oh, we get information from so many people all the time. As you mentioned, we're a very visible industry. I've got a visible access point. I only use a single email, and people know it. And so I get probably thousands of emails a day, and of all varieties of something that happened that went wrong, or something that went great. And please thank that employee of ideas and opportunities. So people love air travel, and they love to engage with air travel. And as a result of that, I want to make sure that I'm accessible for anyone who has good ideas.
So here's another question. This is from Carmen in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the U.S. Really, a couple of questions about data and analytics. How has the use of data analytics helped Delta stay ahead of the curve in the industry? And is there a digital strategy that aims to focus at the customer experience and maybe direct sales as well?
Yeah, well, we're very focused on data and analytics. In fact, some would argue the very first artificial intelligence applications came through the airline industry back 30 or more years ago through use of revenue management technologies. When you think about our business, and we have thousands of flights a day and hundreds of thousands of seats a day that we sell, and the pricing of that, the yield management, the inventory, and the ability for consumers to be able to shop and match and try to find a different product category requires an enormous amount of technology and data analytics. We have a whole team of almost 500 people that do that just for a living, every single day as they're managing the flights and managing the pricing and the changes to make sure that we're meeting the market where they want to buy the seats at, but at the same time not overselling or underselling, and in managing that whole process. But we use analytics, far more than just as a pricing tool and algorithm. It's how we manage our operations, the quality of the predictive technologies we deploy, the engineering, the mechanical applications to ensure that we're providing just absolutely the very best and most reliable air service in the world. Is all about, a lot of it's about using intelligence and taking the insight you're getting off of the planes and off of the engines, and insights from others in terms of how to run a really clean and great operation. One of the things I was most proud of last year, we were named at the end of the year by Cirium, which is the group that looks at airlines all around the world and is a data analytics shop, named Delta as the most reliable airline in the world. And it's the first time they named that, and they named Delta in 2021, and we got their big award for that because of data analytics and the intelligence that our people have at their fingertips to make good decisions for people and provide great quality operations.
One more audience question, and this is something I was going to ask as well, which is the rollout of 5G that's coming. I know Delta was one of the signatories in a letter to the White House that said, this could potentially wreak havoc on the flight control systems. I don't understand how serious an issue this is. Could you clarify really what your concerns are?
It's a very serious issue. We're huge proponents of 5G. I think it's going to be a great technology. We need to update the technological backbone and the infrastructure of our country without a doubt. But we also need to make certain that the application in terms of the rollout can be coordinated along with running a safe aviation system, not just for the airlines, but also for the express package carriers and the UPSs and the FedExes of the world that are also using those airways. And the FAA, as 5G is being rolled out here, had some real concerns about whether the impact of the C-band, which is the spectrum that the telecom companies will be using, could cause interference with readings that the airplanes have, particularly in proximity to the airports and landing, and offset and impact some of our instrument ratings and the quality of the information and other aspects of air travel. And they need to have that fully vetted and fully tested. So it was not the airlines as much as the regulator, the FAA, that was raising that concern and telling us as the operator that you may have to ground flights. You may no longer be able to operate certain types of equipment unless you have a very clear day. If you have difficult conditions, you may have to force people to divert, and it would be very, very disruptive without having fully tested the rollout of the application in the aviation infrastructure. So it's an issue for our government. I'm confident our government's going to be able to solve this, working closely with the FCC as well as the FAA. And the White House is involved, as you mentioned, and Secretary Buttigieg and others. And, it's something that we need our government agencies to collaborate and come up with a great pragmatic solution that doesn't cause customers of the airlines to be affected, because the same people are being able to enjoy and utilize the benefits of 5G. So work in process, hopefully really good news, hopefully soon here on that score, because we need to get an answer soon.
Got it. If you have, a couple more minutes, I have maybe just one more question. If you don't have to dash, we're
sure
a little bit over time, but that's the beauty.
That's okay.
The beauty of pretend television. And that's, I'm always interested in the path that people take to the C-suite, to the CEO role. I mean, your background is as an accountant, as an auditor, as a finance guy. How does that background inform your leadership style now that you are CEO?
Well, it created, I think, probably a comfort with numbers, with analytics, a curiosity about how to influence and impact and have better outcomes using the core information system. One of the things about airlines, when I tell people, some of the core competencies that people need to have strategically within airlines is comfort with analytics. And you also need to be comfortable as a decision maker. We make decisions here, hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, and we need to be really good decision makers as we operate a very, very complex and sophisticated scale company on a global basis 24/7. So I think those are some of the core capabilities that I brought to the airline. I joined Delta about 25 years ago in a finance area, and it enabled me to use some of those analytic tools to eventually move into the commercial side of the business, which I did about 15 years ago. And fortunate enough now to be a CEO for 6 years. So a lot of it's hard to see how an accountant by trade becomes CEO of an airline. But that's when you start thinking about what makes accountants successful is people that are able to read financial statements, read financial data, and be very, very comfortable in analyzing and finding good solutions from the data.
Yeah, I'm told that that's all very important. Ed, I want to thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I mean, as I said at the start, your company is really on the front lines of trying to deliver a needed service during a really challenging time. So thank you for taking the time to be on the New World of Work.
My pleasure, Adi. Good to be with you.
Okay, great. So with that is the end of season 1 of the New World of Work. We will be back with season 2 in March, so stay tuned for that. But I do want to give a shout out to the many people who contributed to making the show interesting, I hope for you, certainly for me. So senior producer, Scott LaPierre, coordinating producer, Julia Butler, broadcast director, Dave DiUlio, director of photography, Ellie Honan, production assistants, Tristan Mejias Thompson and Andy Robinson. Our designers are Dustin Brady, Karen Player, and Kristen Petrillo. Audience engagement, Kelsey Grippenstraw. Publicity and promotion, Alexandra Kephart. So thank you all for watching. As I say, we'll be back with season 2 in March, so stay tuned, and thank you.